All right, I wanted to talk about a couple of items and stacks that people can use, and I really feel like there's an item that is. Some people may realize it's powerful. Some people may not realize it, but I think it's probably overrated because you don't hear a lot of people talking about it. And it's this weapon here, the Zardwart's Dragon Frill Wand. Wanted to talk about how powerful it really is. Um, Basically, it gives you 5 options. You have your normal wand attack, and then you have this one here. I'll show it real quick. It inflicts a control. It's a 2-round control, so the percent chance of it happening is pretty low. And if it does attack itself, it's not that much damage. It's just 92. It's probably the weakest one of them all. Then you have 2 hidden guests. So you have Deary, which gives a universal blind. It's going to be the same amount, 23 blind. A lot of statuses nowadays will increase based on the elemental resistance. Deary is pretty universal. If you change light out of 100, so 115 here, then it'll still give a 23 blind. So it's still 23. So it's pretty consistent. That can come in handy versus monsters with really low resistances. You're going to get a universal blind there. And then you have this one here, and this one gives a fear. And I believe it is also universal, 26.8, and then it doubles if you have a celerity. So that's also can come in handy based on elemental resistance. What I really want to talk about though is one of the most powerful effects is going to be the this middle one here. It's basically a wand attack that has a little bit weakened damage, but it's not so much weaker that it's not worth using over this. In fact, I think using this one pretty regularly instead of this one is desirable. It will cost you 123 MP, so that's really not a lot, but it will inflict a strong choke, and it will actually increase based on light. I think at 100%, it will half the monster's damage. So at 115, you'll see it go down even further. So we're at basically 0.425 from 1 round there, as you can see. So it's half damage there. And so then what I want to do now is I want to show you got the Tears of Daw, which will also inflict a choke, but it'll increase based on water. So in this case, you have water at 70. So what I want to do real quick is if I can get water a little higher. Let's go back to Tears of Dawn, and then this time I'm going to just do a standard, and we'll see if it'll inflict. Alright, and so we have a 0.664 based on the misc. Alright, so what happens if you actually combine it? So now you have a misc and the wand doing a choke. So let's see if they both inflict. We'll find out what happens here. So now we got it all the way down to 0.089 damage. I believe the inflict is going to be it's either going to be intelligence or it's going to be your weapon on here. So basically weapon held. But I think because it costs MP for upkeep, it should be intelligence. I need to look that up. This is probably intelligence also for inflict. I'm not sure what the resist is. Probably endurance. So what you wanna do is you wanna increase your intelligence. But as you can see, 0.089 combined is pretty sickening. And then what you can do is you can take that a little further. And then what's going to end up happening is once you start getting too low, it'll start adding turns, but keep it relatively low. So now, but this one's going to increase based on ice. So with the variety of, now you're inflicting based on water, light, and ice. So it can kind of be all over the map here. So we've got, now we're adding turns. Now we've got 0.007. As you can see, the damage there on the one was 1453. So now we've added a turn, and now it is at 0.007 now for 2 turns. And I think as long as it inflicts, what this will probably do now, if the misc, the wand, and both the pet and the guest inflicts, all it's going to do now is it's going to just add a turn. Next one you'll probably see 3 at the same amount. If one of them doesn't inflict, then it'll change that dynamic. So now we've got 3 turns at 0.007. And so basically it's adding turns as you go. As you can see, 4. So if you wanted to play defense with this wand, and then you can stack some chokes, it's just going to add and add and add. And then, not really sure how it's going to average out here, but if you want to do mandate and get a choke, it added a bunch of turns at that point, and it's still below 1%. So there's some choke stacking. Another thing you can do, let's say you're not too worried about your defense. What I would do is then come back and I would go offensive. So now we're going to do Elevon stacking, but we're going to reduce defense at the same time. And then you're going to be able to see the effects of, so you just did 228 or 226 offense there. So now you only got a 16% damage there. And then now you've got a 192% Elevon. So you just repeat, and then you're just going to increase your damage, 656 there, as you can see. 16% every time. And it'll land the same every time, as long as it inflicts. And another thing you can do, if you wanted to start off with mandate, it should inflict choke based on earth. So we've got a 63, and then from there you'll start to chip away at it. It'll start to decrease, but you'll keep a lot of turns there. So 47 this time, and then if it inflicts, you'll get a little bit lower, 16. So now down to 26. And if you notice, this is a weak monster, but they're just really not doing any damage to me. 23, and it'll just start to lower and lower and lower. And actually, as the turns decrease, the amount of choke will actually start to go down a little faster, because what it's doing is an average. So what we could do here, if you wanted just to do so that one's 55 based on light. The Tears of Dawn, all the Tears of Dawn waits till you're done. So you're going to have 2 turns here. Now we're down to 0.18. We got 284 on the Elevon, and you should see pretty good damage, 645, and that's only based on light there. So as you can see, especially if you have barrier using Necromancer, you're just not going to be able to get through that with these such low. So this is already at 14% damage. So what you're doing by you're stacking choke for defense, but you got your pets and guests out for offense. At least that'll work for on rounds beyond the first round. And that's pretty good damage. I mean, you can't complain about 879 damage. Another thing you can do, let's see here. You can get into your Bard of War, and then just do the same thing, and then you'll have a high likelihood that your pet and guests will start to go twice, and that'll actually increase your Elevons a little more. And then if you notice, choke is 0.089 this time. That's just with 100 water and 115 light. And you just do that every time, and then you just end up dropping bombs on the monster. Or what if you did this stack, you just really need to worry about defense, but you want to use Bard of War for offense, at least the number of hits. You can always come back to what I did a little while ago in Necromancer armor, but now I'm in Bard of War. And then, so now we've got a full choke going with celerities and stuff, and you're going to see this. So now we've got 2 rounds at 10%, and I'm not sure if that took every time. Let's see how it lands up. You're just going to start adding rounds here. I guess one of them didn't take their 18. Yeah, 10% there. And we're at 5 rounds, and it's just going to add and add and add with your choke stacking. The same thing happens with fear. It'll stack rounds and stack effectiveness. Days is the same way. So now I'm at 6 rounds at 0.79. At some point you can get to a certain point where you don't have to worry about what armor you're in anymore. You can switch and just be in whatever armor you choose. If you notice, now I'm at 0.009 damage. So that's pretty sick there. So I'm actually going to start off, see if I can get a celerity here. And then I think I'm gonna do Uno Polka and Arcane Amp. Help me with inflictions. And then from here, I have not tested this, so I'm thinking from here I'll probably be fine. Not going to be quite as effective because it's the resistances. So I'm already down to, let's see, we got 2 rounds at 0.6. So at this point, I'm not going to be too worried about damage. Is going to be low enough. Even on this nuke, it's probably not going to do nothing. And then you could just tank it all the way down to the... So now we're at 2 rounds at 0.2. Won't inflict it quite as often, but you can see that it still is able to maintain. So that normally would do a couple thousand damage. I mean, I have 80% to water. So I mean, that tells you right there that this choke stacking is actually quite potent. And I'll have to heal my MP here. But anyway, that's just wanted to show you some choke stacking and Zardwarts on that end of it. And another thing, if you have, let's see here, let's do this. I showed you the Deary, and then maybe if you wanted to have a pet and a guest that is inflicting blind, you could go with the Brilliance of Da also. So let's do that real quick with Bard of War, and it'll be a similar sort of mechanic. Let's see here, so we can find it right there. You could probably also equip Chaser Bracer, and then what you're doing at that point, in fact, let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this, and then I'll just do this. Okay. And then we'll see some pretty quick so I can change that over there. Let's watch. We've got 36, 84, and then because of the, so it left with the 29. I guess Chaser Bracer, and then the Gilded Leprechaun is actually bugging out. So now we're at 94. I'm using Dragon Frill just for the choke, and then you can see now we've got multiple rounds with the lower. Just another way to tank. Alright, we got to that, and then I'll switch over to Bard of War, and then you'll start to see I really hope they eventually re-release all of the old variants. I think there's an ice and a darkness that I can remember. I don't know if they've got one for every element, but so we left with the 29 blind because he missed. Making sure we get the choke down, just in case I get hit. Alright. And as you can see, the blind builds, and then this guy bugs it out, like I've showed before. Alright, well there's some choke stacking, there's some blind stacking using Zardwart's very underrated item in my opinion.